Rivalry week comes a week too early for my liking in Los Angeles, with the USC taking on UCLA. Being a traditionalist that likes to see that as the last game of the season, that's been violated in recent years by the likes of Notre Dame infringing on the Pac-12 schedule. Nonetheless, we've got USC UCLA at the Rose Bowl, the most beautiful setting in college football, as we bring in Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. The records are ugly, but once they put the uniforms on and stand on the same field, especially at the Rose Bowl, Tony, and I believe I've made this statement to you as well, this is the best looking game in college football.
Yeah, you're not going to get any argument out of me. It is tradition that both teams wear their home uniforms for the game. So as I pointed out in my preview a couple days ago, this is just like a burst of color inside the Rose Bowl on a Saturday afternoon, which, I don't think you're going to get much argument out of many people. It is one of the greatest venues for college football, with the San Gabriel Mountains in the backdrop and the sun going down late afternoon, by the time the game is coming to its close later on. It is a great spectacle for college football. There's no question about it.
So unless these two teams play like a 52-50 two-point conversion failed in the third overtime type of game, this probably is not going to go down into the annals based on where the two teams stand going into it. Typically, we've got two competitive teams that are ranked, vying for a Pac-12 championship, or at least one of them, and the other one's trying to spoil it. This year, we've got no such deal. We've got two underwhelming performances by both teams.
Yeah, one of the things we dubbed it earlier in the week was this is one town with two teams going in two different directions. Strangely enough, even though they both have losing records, the directions they're going are odd. To put it in perspective, and I know you and I have talked about this before, one of the things that makes this rivalry unique is there's 13.2 miles separating these two schools. That's it. That's as close as you get in any rivalry matchup in major college football. So these guys, they went to high school together. Now they're on opposite sides for the next 4 years in one of the most heated rivalries in all of college sports. You got families that are separated, that don't speak to each other during this week. You got brothers against brothers. You have fathers went to one school, son go to the other school, things like that. It gets ugly. But in terms of this season, no one expected UCLA in year one of Chip Kelly to have a great season. It was a rebuild. It was a reclamation project. I know you and I have talked about it before. Kelly had 2 years as offensive coordinator at Oregon before he became the head coach. So everything that he had as head coach, he built as offensive coordinator. The players he had, he inherited from being head coach. So there was everything that he had as head coach was already his. No one expected greatness. They expected progress. Not sure you've really seen a lot of progress when you're 2-8 right now, but there have been glimpses later on, late in the season. SC, on the other hand, at 5-5, and the wolves are howling in LA right now. There is no happiness with Clay Helton right now in Trojan land. You look at the USC blog sites, you look at the fan blogs and the fan posts, and there is no happiness with Clay Helton at 5-5, a guy who won the Pac-12 championship, won another Pac-12 South title, won the Rose Bowl, all within his 3 years. And the really only question right now seems to be this week with regards to SC is Helton coaching for his job this week against SC? He's got Notre Dame the following week, which is, I know you hate this, but it is tradition when the SC Notre Dame game is in LA that it comes on Thanksgiving week after the SC UCLA game. When the Notre Dame game is in South Bend, then it's in the middle of the season. But regardless, the question is he coaching for his job this week at 5-5 because he's got that one bad season? And I think part of what happens is the Pac-12 South was such a dumpster fire this season that it was there for the taking, and SC couldn't take it. You know, they were nowhere near it. I mean, the offense has been anywhere from average to very much not good. And so Helton took the play calling duties away from offensive coordinator T. Martin a couple of weeks ago. And what do you get out of it? You get a 15-14 loss at home to Cal last week. I mean, what do you get out of Clay Helton taking over the play calling duties? Not much. And so there is a lot of, while there's some kind of sit and accept whatever is happening at UCLA, and it's been a terrible season, but if we beat SC, we'll live with it for a year. And on the other side of town, 13 miles south down the road, this is horrible. 5-5 is unacceptable. And we're starting to roll out some names as to who we want in place of Helton next year.
We got Tony on the line from We're breaking down the Trojans. They will tee it up at the Rose Bowl at 12:30 local time on Fox. I've got to go back to this scheduling situation.
Go ahead.
This is all I remember from the time I was 8 years old until, I don't know, it seemed like a handful of years ago that I would watch USC and UCLA play the final weekend of the season. And then it seemed as though at some point in the last, I don't know, it feels like 5 years that I started to see, why is UCLA playing Stanford? What's going on? What is going on here that there are these other matchups, the final regular season game? How long has this been going on?
No, I give you that with the UCLA Stanford game or the UCLA ending the season with someone else. That's been 8-9 years. I give you that. And look, I'm with you. I'm a traditionalist. I got a few years on you in age. And look, I grew up with that third week of November was Ohio. In the morning I was watching Ohio State, Michigan, and then going to, for a lot of years, the Coliseum when UCLA and USC split the Coliseum and, shared the Coliseum as their home stadium. And you go to the USC UCLA game, and that game often, those two games often determined who was going to the Rose Bowl, and that was that. But the SC, I will say the SC Notre Dame game, when it's in LA, was traditionally Thanksgiving weekend, regardless of the SC UCLA game. But yeah, UCLA was never playing after that. And then, but you built in, what you did was when they went to the conference championship game that first week of December, then they moved the schedule around so that there was another game in between, so you weren't sitting idle that week in between the third week of November and the conference championship game. So it started to move things around a little bit. I'm not a big fan of it because, like you, I'm a traditionalist, but that's just another way of saying I'm old.
And I'm right there with you. In 2017 and 2016, they did not play the final game. They played the penultimate game of the regular season. In 2015, it did end with USC UCLA. In 2014, back and forth. Okay, back and forth. I don't know why it's 2 consecutive years. The last two in 2016 and 17, and now 18. It's been 3 consecutive years. But before that, yeah, I'm seeing like you outlined in every other USC UCLA. So if I go prior to the Pac-12 championship game, which is 2010, all right, there I see, yes, USC is the final game on UCLA's schedule every year. Okay.
And when you look at that, though, they pushed it back a week. So it was later in November instead of the third week of November when that happened. So again, just an altering of the schedule compared to what you and I were used to doing.
Actually, Tony, and you'll know much more about it. I'm looking at games in the early 2000s that were played in December.
Yeah.
December 4th, December 3rd, December 2nd, 4 consecutive years in December, 2003 through 7. They played in December.
Right.
Interesting.
A sacrilege to the traditionalists.
I'm okay with December, November, whatever it is.
Just
The
the
last
last
game of the
game.
season. I expect Florida, Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, USC, UCLA, on and on and on.
I get
Those
you.
games to be played.
I get you. I'm with you on that. I'm not arguing.
All
It
right,
was
let's look at the
how I
UCLA.
celebrated my birthday every year. Was always within a few days of that SC UCLA game. So I'm with you.
So while we diagnose 5-5 and 2-8, I'll pick on the 2-8 squad. So
Sure.
you kind of given a pass to Chip Kelly, and it's the first year. So regardless of 2-8, 4-6, 0-10, whatever, sure you want to see progress, and you want to see that you don't give a complete pass. That regardless of what we see this season, we don't care because we understand he's building a program. So you want to be balanced, and reasonable fans are balanced in regards to we're not really looking at the record, but it should reflect some level of progress. And they have played much better the last month to 6 weeks. So I expected them to play a little bit better and win a few more games. But then once they got into the season, I didn't know that a lot of people knew how good Cincinnati was or Fresno State and some of these other squads. So the UCLA fan base is even though the record looks really ugly, they're okay with the progress of the team.
I would okay, maybe a bit strong. They're frustrated, but willing to give a little. How's that? Because it's the way they're losing that causes the frustration. The Arizona State game last week was completely winnable, but it was mistakes that should not be happening in week 10 of the season. UCLA is on a drive for a potential game-tying field goal. And Wilton Speight gets sacked from behind because the left tackle doesn't pick up his block. Speight fumbles the ball. He winds up recovering it, but it's a 8 to 10 yard loss. And then they get back-to-back false start penalties. It's in the last minute, so the clock, they get the 10-second burn off on the clock as well. Next thing you know, they're nowhere. The drive is killed, game over, and that's that. Those kinds of things, false start penalties when you're on a potential game tying or game winning drive. They've had 3 games in a row now where false start penalties on a field goal attempt near the end or exactly at the end of the half has killed the field goal attempt, caused them to miss because it put them out of range. Those kinds of things should be completely unacceptable at this point in the season, no matter how young the team is, no matter how much you're in a rebuild mode. Those kinds of things. One of the things I pointed out a couple of weeks ago is August is for youth. November has got to be for pulling yourself together. And this team has shown glimpses of that, flashes of that, no consistency in it. And part of the problem is the youth. Part of the problem is players dropping like flies with injuries. Monday at practice, Chip Kelly had 57 healthy, active players, scholarship players at practice. Tons of walk-ons. I mean, the kick return team had 2 juniors, and the rest of them were walk-ons and freshmen that were getting most of the reps on the kick return team. It was insane to watch. Well, can really watch it because we're thrown out of practice at a certain point. But just to get a sense of what he's dealing with right now with players that have, from the beginning of camp, that have left the team, been removed from the team, that are injured, season-ending injuries. It's been beyond what most fans would expect, and certainly beyond what Kelly would have expected. Being Monday before SC week and have 57 healthy scholarship players at practice. So there's a little bit of give and take. Again, the mistakes are insane because some of them are so rudimentary. But then there's the look at the guys that they've got playing. They're down to 6 healthy linebackers while they're playing a 3-4 defense where you would generally want 7, 8, 9 linebackers to be able to run through in rotation. It's a lot to ask. So there's a little bit of give. So I wouldn't say the fan base is okay with it. I'd say they're grumbling, but learning to dig deep into what they can find to understand what's going on.
So that evaluation starts with the record. The fans first look at the record. Then if they're thinking just a little bit, then they go past that and say, okay, are we playing better? And again, as I mentioned, I believe that they generally are over the past 6 or 7 weeks. You know, there were thoughts out there looking at the schedule and the performance. This team's not going to win a game. They're going to go 0-12. Well,
Right.
just the law of probabilities led me to believe that they'll win some games here. It looked to be in that 2-8, which could be 2-10 at some point range at the end of the season. So digging a little bit deeper toward the guy that could be the future at the most important position in terms of Dorian-Thompson Robinson, has that progress been seen to the liking of the fan base and yourself?
No. And part of it is, and I don't want to make excuses, part of it is the injury, the shoulder injury. You know, early on, when, you know, we'll remember at the beginning of the season, which now seems like so long ago, week 1 with Cincinnati, your guy Wilton Speight was named the starter because he was most ready to go. He was the most ready to lead the team, and he didn't make it out of the first half before he got, you know, the back injury, and was then, you know, and when Thompson Robinson came in, you could see the difference in the offense, and that they went to more of a rollout offense, a sprint out offense, which is what you imagine a Chip Kelly offense to be. You imagine what he wants it to be down the road with UCLA. Thompson Robinson showed an inability to do it. He wasn't ready yet to execute. His reads weren't there. It got better. He actually had his best game against Oklahoma, which was odd because it was such a tough game. But then he was terrible against Fresno State. It got better week by week, little by little. And there were games where you could see the offense rolling. You could see the momentum. You could see the pace that a Chip Kelly offense would, could, and should be. And then he got hurt. He got a shoulder injury. Speight came in the Arizona game for him. When Thompson Robinson came back, I don't know if he rushed back or if there was a setback from him not practicing enough. The game wasn't there. The offense wasn't rolling, and he got hurt again. There is no, because injuries are a very tight-lipped subject at UCLA. Practices are closed. There's not a lot to glean in terms of information from Chip Kelly. There's no telling if Thompson Robinson could have gone last week against Arizona State, but Speight frankly had a good game and did a good job. And, you know, there's no telling who's going to play this week because Chip Kelly's not going to tell you. You know, show up Saturday, turn on the TV Saturday, and you'll find out. My guess is it's going to be Speight. Whether Thompson Robinson is healthy enough to go or not, it's going to be Speight. It's going to, again, it changes the offense. It creates more of a drop back offense because Speight is not mobile. He can't throw the ball on the run with the efficiency that Thompson Robinson does. But Thompson Robinson, coming off the shoulder injury, has shown that he has struggled. At this point in the season, I think you got to just, you know, kind of give Thompson Robinson the off season, let him heal, let him practice, let him have the spring camp, come back fully ready next year with a full season of the playbook under his arm and a better understanding of how to do it and how to operate it.
Yeah, Wilton Spate's the boy. So
he is.
Tony here, you would think that I have Wilton Spate jerseys hung up on the walls in my house, and I have my own personal camera that ISOs only Wilton Spate when I watch UCLA games.
You have been promoting him since he declared for UCLA as a graduate transfer, and I mocked you for it, and I've been proven wrong. He played well. It was a winnable game last week against Arizona State. Outside of UCLA mistakes, UCLA killed themselves, and not much of that was on Speight. He had some mistakes, but you know. The challenge is that it requires UCLA to change up their offense. Chip Kelly will not admit it. As a matter of fact, he's flat out denied it. But if you watch the games and rewatch them multiple times, as we do, it does. The offense changes. It's not an offense in motion the way it is with Thompson Robinson. but it can't be. It's just because though that's not the skill set that Spate has. But again, if I have my suspicions, there's no reason to go to Thompson Robinson on Saturday. You go to Spate. He's played well the last week and a half, 2 weeks. He's practiced the most. Don't know the health of Thompson Robinson's shoulder. There's no reason to throw it out there and risk it.
And looking at DTR's game log here, I wish I could go back, and if I could go back to any UCLA game and watch the game, there must have been more compelling games at the time. And of course, UCLA had no wins at this point, but the game score, even though in a loss, the game score that surprised a lot of people on this particular Saturday was hanging within a touchdown of Washington at the Rose Bowl, 31-24. Washington, of course, could argue they're the best team in the Pac-12, regardless of what happens toward the championship. And he had a nice game against Washington. They hung within a touchdown. And then they go the next week and they beat Cal 37-7. And we've seen what Cal has been able to do since then. And that there's kind of the pinnacle, the high mark of the season in regards to evaluating UCLA and thinking, okay, they're taking off a little bit here. But he did play well against Washington, and like you say, unfortunately against Arizona, he got nicked up quite a bit, and that's affected his play.
Right. Yeah, and those games again, that's where you could start to see the potential. That's where UCLA fans started to get excited. In the press conference after the Washington game, even the players were kind of like, we can feel it. We know we lost. Chip Kelly was like, I don't want to hear it. There's no such thing as a moral victory. To get that, coaches need to say that, but the players were like, we can feel it. It's starting to click. We can sense the momentum. You know, no one's happy about a loss, but we played all right, and we hung with a really good team. And from an offensive standpoint, they were establishing a running game with Joshua Kelly, and Kelly has proven to be a huge benefit for UCLA this season. First time in years that they've had a viable running attack, and so you could really see it. But you know, with DTR only being able to play intermittently because of the shoulder injury and then re-injuring it, at this point, I think you're better off just going with Spate, changing up the offense to more of the drop back, style offense. Use the tight ends a little bit more like you did last week against Arizona State, and go with what you got.
Got Tony Siracusa on the line from Last Word on College Football. We encourage you to check out the site. Tony, we got Kevin McGuffey. We got Mike Laval. Lauren Beasley does a great job as well covering college football across the board. Unfortunately, Tony, especially not going to a postseason game, we're only 2 weeks away from, what we're going to be doing then for about 8 months. We're going to be dissecting positions and speculating and watching spring practice and making a mountain out of very little, because that's what we like to do. Sure. And that's what this is for. So we're only 2 games away from that situation. Until then, what do you want to see out of this football team for the next 2 weeks?
You want to see, I think it's trite to say you want to see progress. Obviously, you want to see progress, but I think you need to see specific things. You need to see a reduction. If you're a UCLA fan, you need to see a reduction in penalties. And it's not just penalties. That's too obvious. You need to see a reduction of penalties in those critical moments of drives, because those are focus penalties. When you're getting called for offsides on a field goal attempt, that's a focus issue. You need to see a reduction in those. You need, your offense needs to be, you need to keep it in perspective, especially if Spate is playing, because you're not going to have Wilton Spate next year. He's a grad transfer, so you're not going to have Spate. You need to see, is there a running game behind the offensive line, because you're going to have most of this offensive line back. This is the third youngest team in FBS right now in terms of the number of snaps being given to freshmen and sophomores. So you're going to have most of this offensive line back next year. You're going to have Joshua Kelly back next year. What does that look like? You're going to have most of the defense back. Are they aggressive? What does that look like? So you need to see a reduction in the penalties. You need to see some sense of a unification of a system. And by that, I mean the defense has kind of been a roller coaster. There's been times it's been aggressive and you see blitzing from the edges, and there have been times based on the manpower they have available to them, they're playing straight up and hoping for the best. And you see a guy, like Manny Wilkins at Arizona State, slice him and dice him on the edges, So you need to see, you've got SC this week, and SC is kind of on its heels right now. And JT Daniels is struggling. Are you going to be aggressive? Are you going to go at him? Or are you going to, kind of sit back and just try and contain? I think you're gonna get a real sense of what Chip Kelly's plan going forward is in these next two games. Stanford, UCLA has, to quote the late great Lakers basketball announcer Chick Hearn, UCLA hasn't beaten Stanford since Hector was a pup, and it's been 10 years. And so and Stanford is vulnerable. Bryce Love is nicked up every week. He's not going to own you the way he otherwise would. If you're ever, and you got him at home, if you're ever got a shot at Stanford, this is it. So you have. I'm not going to put a lot into momentum. One of the beat writers who writes for a local newspaper, I won't call him out because I like him. He asked Chip Kelly this week about winning the last two games, creating momentum for next year. And most of us at one point in the season have been mocked by Chip Kelly, either at practice or in a post-game press conference. We've all been chided by Chip Kelly. We got chipped. As it just happens to the media. And this guy got chipped. He was like, there's no such thing as momentum going into the next year. Things change. People are hot one year and they're not hot the next. Nobody remembers who the fourth best team was last year because it didn't matter. The years change and things change. And Chip went into this soliloquy about how one year Milli Vanilli was hot and then they crashed. And, we got insights into Chip Kelly's, pop music, repertoire. That was the depth of his knowledge.
It goes beyond that. But,
I would not count on it. Not with Chip. So, there's not but I agree. There's not a lot of momentum that takes you into next year because you got recruiting in December. You got signing day in December. You got another one in February. You got a slew of new players coming in. Things change, but how does the program feel? How do the next two wins set you up to close on that recruiting? How does the program set itself up? What's the fan base feeling like? Because even at 2-8, you beat SC, you beat Stanford, you're feeling a little better about yourself than you are if you're going in, 2-10 and getting another beat down by these guys.
Mentioning that particular question of Chip Kelly and just the general notion of him nitpicking certain questions draws me back to I certainly wouldn't point out the colleague, but he was basically shoulder to shoulder with me, asked a certain basketball coach at the collegiate level who was headed to the Final Four that year, Coach, how do you feel like you control your own destiny? Well, first of all, as we know, controlling your own destiny, that's an oxymoron. But I think we at least take that for granted. We understand what that, you control your path to a championship. But so there was just a brilliant soliloquy on regardless of how I feel. We're talking about a factual situation. How does how I feel affect a factual situation? It was beautiful.
It's happened to all of us, and I got taken to task by Chip in a post-game press conference once this season, and it happens. He didn't like my question, and it happens.
All right, Tony, as the Southern California sun glistens down on those two beautiful uniforms, especially again on that field as opposed to the Coliseum, on that Rose Bowl field with the San Gabriels in the background, it will cause me at times to forget that these are two very marginal, to be kind, football teams until, Daniels missed another pass. He missed that guy who's wide open. Oh, there was another drop pass. Another illegal procedure. Oh, yeah, these two teams aren't really that good. but
Right.
it will mask it at times.
No, that's true. There is, even with the bad teams. Look, there was, UCLA fans will remember this, when their season was going nowhere. Late night game, I think a 7 or 7:30 game a lot of years ago. It got pushed back to late night at the Rose Bowl, and a fourth string quarterback by the name of John Barnes, who was a walk-on, who was at his fourth school in 4 years, wound up quarterbacking UCLA and hitting J.J. Stokes with a handful of touchdown passes, because that's just those are the things that happen in these games. You know, you get guys who come out of nowhere who, become stars, at least for one game, in games that you wouldn't expect, and they become legends on the university, even if the rest of the country is kind of like, oh yeah, look at that, it was a fun game to watch. They become legends on the UCLA or USC campus.
As opposed to last season, in which we finally got to see Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold on the same field for that one glorious time.
Yeah.
Tony Siracusa joining us from Last Word on College Football. It's USC UCLA. It's a 12:30 start local time, 3:30 Eastern on Fox. All right, Tony, we appreciate the breakdown, and we will talk soon.
All right, always glad to do it, Mark.